Let us understand the very interesting story of the greatest scientific rivalry in history between Sir Isaac Newton and Gottfried Leibniz, two great scientists. But before that, let's understand what was Newton's contribution to science. Newton was the man who saw the universe in an apple. Once upon a time in 17th century England, a quiet, shy, slightly odd young man was sitting under an apple tree. Yes, that story is partly true. An apple fell, and while most people would just eat it, Isaac Newton began wondering, why did it fall down? Why not sideways or upwards? That simple curiosity led to discoveries that changed how humanity understood the universe forever. What were Newton's greatest theories? His first theory was the laws of motion, the rules of how everything moves. Newton gave us three laws that describe how things move, from a rolling ball to a planet in space. The first was the law of inertia. Things like to keep doing what they are doing. If something is at rest, it stays at rest. If it's moving, it keeps moving, unless something stops or changes it, like friction or force. For example, a football will not roll forever, but that is only because grass and air slow it down. The second law is force equal to mass into acceleration. The more massive something is, the harder you have to push it to move it faster. For example, it is easier to throw a cricket ball than a bowling ball because the bowling ball has more mass. The third law is action equal to reaction. Every force creates an equal and opposite force. These three simple laws describe everything from car crashes to rocket launches. Newton's second law was the universal law of gravitation, the great cosmic rule. That apple story made Newton realize something mind blowing. The same force that pulls apples to the ground also keeps the moon circling Earth. He said that every object in the universe attracts every other object. The bigger the objects and the closer they are, the stronger the attraction. Basically, till Einstein came in, Newton's definition of gravity is what ruled the scientific community. Einstein later on refined the concept of gravity. He defined gravity as the curvature of space-time. But till then, the Newtonian definition of gravity was accepted by everyone. It was revolutionary because it united the sky and earth under one law. Before Newton, people thought that heavenly bodies followed special divine rules, but Newton showed that they obeyed the same physics as apples and stone. Theory of light and color. Newton did a clever experiment. He passed sunlight through a glass prism and found it split into all the colors of the rainbow. He realized that white light is actually a mixture of all the colors. He even invented a new kind of telescope, the reflecting telescope, using mirrors instead of lenses, which gave clearer images. His biggest contribution was calculus, the math of change. To describe how planets moved smoothly in curved paths, Newton needed new mathematics. So he invented it. He called it the method of fluxions. At the same time, in another country, a brilliant German mathematician named Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz invented the same idea, calling it calculus. This is where the drama begins. The great Newton Leibniz War. Imagine two geniuses, Isaac Newton and Gottfried Leibniz, who both discover the same powerful tool, but one gets all the credit. Leibniz published first in 1684. Newton had actually developed it earlier but had not published it because Newton was very secretive. When Leibniz's papers appeared, Newton's followers accused him of plagiarism. What followed was one of the ugliest academic feuds in history. Both sides hurled insults in letters and pamphlets. The Royal Society, which Newton led, investigated, and Newton secretly wrote the report himself, declaring himself as the victor. The mathematical world split into Newtonians, mostly based in England, and Leibnizians in Europe. In the long run, historians agreed that both invented calculus independently. But Newton's ego couldn't stand sharing credit. He was a brilliant genius, but also incredibly sensitive, jealous, and secretive. Newton's personality was very interesting. He was deeply introverted. He could go days or weeks without speaking to anyone. He was obsessive. He sometimes worked for days without eating or sleeping. He was very spiritual and mystical. He studied alchemy, the so called pseudoscience of creating gold. He also studied biblical codes and end of the world prophecies more than physics later in his life. Basically, he was so religious that his intention to go into physics was to prove Bible right. But what happened was quite the opposite. He was a control freak. As head of the Royal Mint, he personally hunted counterfeiters. One he had executed. He was vengeful. Once you crossed him, he never forgave you. He had a childlike curiosity. Despite everything, he never stopped asking why. When someone asked how he made so many discoveries, he humbly said, by always thinking about them. Newton's laws ruled science for nearly 300 years until Einstein came along. Einstein later said, Newton was the greatest genius who ever lived and also the most fortunate, for he found a universe that could be described by his laws. In short, Newton was not just a man under an apple tree. He was the man who connected heaven and earth with mathematics and proved that the same invisible threads tie together apples, moons, and minds. And the rivalry between Newton and Leibniz was something that could rival a great movie script. Thank you so much for listening.